What's the first thing you'd do if you were alone in a factory on the outskirts of the city, guarding the place at night, and suddenly heard a strange noise inside? You might think about running away to escape the fear, but how would you feel if things escalated from just noises to something even stranger, more terrifying, and inescapable, especially when your wife and young son are with you in the same place? How could you face that? That's exactly what happened, word for word, to the person in today's story. I guarantee you haven't heard this one before. So don't forget to hit that like button, my friend, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the channel. I share real scary stories here, so if you have a story you'd like to share, you can send it to me via the email shown on the screen. Almar is a 33-year-old Iraqi guy living in Bielefeld, Germany, married to a woman named Sarah, who is also Iraqi. Almar says that 3 years ago, he was working as a truck driver for a company. The job was great in every way. Financially, I had a lot, thank God, but the problem was that the job required me to travel between different German cities, and my wife was left alone all the time. I would be gone for 3 days or more and then return for just a one-day break before heading out again. And I'm the type who gets really anxious and worried about my wife, so I decided to quit the job and look for another one that would keep us close together, something normal with no travel, and with a salary similar to my old job. Basically, a stable job in one place with a good salary. After searching and asking around, I found out about a factory owner who posted a job opening on a well-known website in Germany. The job was for a night guard, and the best part was that the job came with housing, so I wouldn't have to pay rent and could live for free in accommodation provided by the factory. I didn't think much about it, called the job owner, and told him I was married, and that this job would suit me perfectly. He said the job was really easy. You have an entire factory that's closed at night. Your job is to guard it from the inside. Don't go outside the factory, and there's no danger in this job. Plus, you'll get a salary, and because you're married, the housing is covered, along with the bills and even some food expenses. Honestly, this was a dream job, but the only downside was that I wouldn't have any days off throughout the year, except for a full month of vacation at the end of the year, during which I'd have a replacement. I immediately agreed to this and got the factory's location on WhatsApp. The problem was that the factory was located at the very edge of the city, literally surrounded by farms on 3 sides, and the 4th side was a water treatment plant. And imagine, even the road leading to this factory wasn't a regular road, it was a dirt road that ran between the trees, with another road, but far and somewhat long. I thought to myself, in the end, I'm going to be a night guard. I'll have the whole day to go out and do whatever I want, as long as I come back before work. So everything was actually perfect for this job. I accepted the job, and within a short time, I moved all my stuff into the accommodation attached to the factory. The place where I'd live was about 200 meters away from where I worked. Sarah would stay home at night while I guarded the place from midnight until 9 a.m. Life was going smoothly, and everything was going as I wished. After a whole month passed, one night while I was sitting and monitoring the security cameras, I started hearing a faint noise coming from inside the factory. It sounded like a small pebble or stone being lightly tossed, and because it was so quiet, I could hear it clearly. I thought, okay, it's nothing, just a sound that came and went, nothing more. But then I started hearing more than one stone being thrown randomly on the ground. I got really scared, so I turned on all the interior lights in the factory and waited to hear the sound a third time so I could pinpoint its location. But then, the disaster struck. Without any warning, in the middle of the silence, the main entrance door to the factory started getting hit hard, as if someone was banging on it from the outside with all their might. With the echo in the place and the stillness, the sound froze me in fear. I remembered that I was the guard here, so I had to do something and figure out what was going on. One of the points I forgot to mention is that I wasn't allowed to open the door for any reason, not even if it was the factory manager himself. He had explicitly instructed me never to open the door and never to leave my post, even if the whole factory caught fire. So, I went to check the cameras to see who was standing at the door, banging like that. But I swear, there was no one standing outside the door. This worried me, and I thought maybe one of the workers from the water treatment plant was playing a prank. But that was also strange because I didn't know anyone, never even met one of them. That day passed peacefully, and a few days went by before the same exact thing happened again. But this time, I didn't hear the sound of stones. No. This time, I just heard the banging on the door, and it was very loud. I checked the entrance camera again, but still, nothing. And since it was just the sound of the banging, I thought maybe it was an animal, either a human playing a prank or a regular animal. I was seriously thinking that someone was messing with me. As for how they were doing it, God knows, but I became convinced that it was indeed a prank. Days and weeks passed, and my wife Sarah became pregnant. I got used to the sounds I was hearing every now and then, and it became normal. 7 months went by like this. The problem was that I was alone in this city. I didn't have any friends or relatives at all. I was worried about my wife, fearing she might need me when I wasn't around to help her, especially since she was pregnant and somewhat scared. So I thought I needed to find a solution, and I did. I spoke to the factory manager, explained my situation, and he said, "Okay, bring your wife and have her stay with you in the office. You can arrange the storage room next to the monitoring office as a bedroom, and that way, your wife will always be nearby. If she needs you, you'll be there." He even added her name to the emergency list so that if she went into labor, an ambulance would be at the factory door immediately. I thanked him so much for that, and I arranged the storage room into a full bedroom right next to the monitoring office, the room that no one entered but me. Also, inside the factory, Sarah started coming every day and spending the night with me there. Everything was going well until what you're about to hear happened one day. Sarah was sleeping in that room, and I started hearing the sound of banging on the factory door again. The sound I had gotten used to, I ignored it as usual, and it eventually went away. But then, I was shocked when Sarah woke up from her sleep, completely terrified and in shock. "What happened?" I asked. She said she had a dream about an old man with a strange appearance, holding a wooden stick and banging it on the factory door. "I don't know how I saw him, but that's exactly what I saw," she said. I told her, "Yeah, the door was actually being hit, and the sound probably entered your dream, nothing more." I was laughing because it was a normal thing. You might hear a sound while you're asleep, wake up, and find out that the sound was real, happening in reality. This might have happened to some of you before. She said, "I don't know what to say, but I felt like that man looked directly at me in the dream, and when he saw me, he left. Even though I was dreaming, I felt like he actually saw me." I convinced her that it was just a dream, and we got past that situation, which repeated about 4 more times, with the exact same details every time. And each time, I tried to convince her it was just a dream. One day, my wife Sarah gave birth, and God blessed me with a son whom I named Ziad. I asked him why he chose the name Ziad specifically, out of curiosity since he was living in Germany. I thought he might pick a foreign name. Almar, the person in the story, told me, because I've never met anyone named Ziad who wasn't wealthy, either a businessman or a property owner. Do you think that's true? Anyway, let's continue the story. Almar said the factory owner gave him a month's leave to rest and spend time with his newborn son. After that month, I also had my annual vacation, so I ended up with 2 full months off. During this time, a specialist doctor was taking care of my son and also looking after my wife, provided by the factory owner as a medical precaution. Because of this, I considered my job a dream job, but after this leave ended, something happened that made me quit my job, and it almost destroyed my life. What happened? Listen and be shocked. After my leave ended, the nurse's care period was over, and she left. I got worried about my wife and son, so I told her to come stay with me at the factory during the night so I could be close to them. During the day, we would be together at home. It was a tough idea, but we had no other choice. She agreed, and we set everything up. For the first 5 days, nothing happened, but on the 6th day, I started hearing a noise coming from outside the factory. This time, the sound wasn't the usual banging on the door that I had gotten used to. It was more like a faint moaning, and a man's voice talking. The problem was that I couldn't understand the words, neither English, Arabic, nor German. I looked at the cameras, nobody was there, but the sound was still present. This time, I decided I needed to confirm that I was actually hearing it and prove that I wasn't imagining things. I went to the factory door, and sure enough, I could hear the sound coming from right behind the door. A moaning sound, and also some words, but strange words that were completely incomprehensible, not Arabic, not English, not German, really, a language I've never heard before. I went back to the office to check the surveillance cameras, and there was actually no one in front of the door, even though just seconds before, I heard that sound, which was still very much there. The sound was still there in front of the factory door, but there was no one on the camera. I decided to stay inside the office and not leave. Sarah was asleep in the room, and after a few minutes, I heard my baby son, Ziad, crying. I tried not to get distracted because my wife was right next to him, so she would surely wake up and calm him down. But his crying intensified, and Sarah neither woke up nor called me. I got worried and went to see what was happening. What I saw was strange and terrifying in every sense of the word. Sarah was awake in her bed, but it was as if she was restrained. Her eyes were wide open, moving and tearing up, but she wasn't moving. I spoke to her, but she didn't respond. My son was crying with all his might, and I was just standing there, shocked, not knowing what was happening. I tried to wake Sarah up or bring her out of the state she was in, and I saw her looking at me, her eyes following me, but she wasn't moving. From what I could see, it seemed like she wanted to talk to me but couldn't. I left her and picked up my son to calm him down. At that moment, I don't know what happened next. All I remember is feeling a powerful blow right in the middle of my back, which caused me to fall to the ground, and my son Ziad fell from my hands onto the bed, on top of his mother. I was in so much pain that I couldn't even breathe properly until I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I had no idea how much time had passed. I was in pain and terrified for my son and my wife, who were exactly as I had left them, still sleeping, with my son literally lying on top of her, asleep. I lifted my son off of her, and thank God he was fine, but I tried to wake him up, and there was no response. That night was known only to God. Because, quite simply, my wife Sarah wouldn't wake up. I called the factory manager and told him what had happened, that I had taken a powerful hit to my back, making it difficult for me to move, and that I had no idea who had hit me. The factory was locked from the inside. Just a few minutes later, the factory owner arrived quickly, along with an ambulance. My wife, my son, and I were all taken to a nearby hospital, and thank God, there was nothing seriously wrong with my wife, just a simple medical procedure, and she'd be back to normal. My son Ziad was also perfectly fine. As for me, it was very clear that I had indeed been hit by something directly in the middle of my back. The blow was straight and strong, as if I had been struck by a pipe, for example. We stayed in the hospital that day, and after a few hours, Sarah finally woke up. But what she told me after that, I'll never forget for the rest of my life. She said she dreamt of the same man again, and this time he was groaning in anger, striking the ground with the stick in his hand. Then, she saw him inside the room, standing directly above her bed, and this time she was awake. It wasn't a dream, the man was standing tall while she lay on the bed. What happened next was that he placed the wooden stick on her stomach, right over her belly. She started to feel a burning sensation inside her, and she became completely paralyzed. Then he went over to our son, Ziad, and just stood there, staring at him. At that moment, she heard the man's voice speaking to her, saying, "You don't belong here. You could become mine, and this child doesn't have to live." He raised his stick and placed it on Ziad's belly. Ziad started crying loudly, and at the same time, she was burning from the inside due to a heat that she couldn't see the source of. It felt like real fire, fire inside her body, specifically in her belly. And when you came in, she saw you, and the man was standing behind you, and he hit you with the stick. That's all she remembers. Dear viewer, the events I've described to you are beyond what words can convey. No matter how much you try to imagine it, it's impossible to truly grasp what happened in reality. And on top of everything that occurred, listen to the bigger catastrophe. My wife, Sarah, began to change, and on more than one occasion, she tried to kill our son Ziad in various ways, but by God's grace, I always arrived in the nick of time. Due to the constant shouting between my wife and me, the neighbors reported us to the police. After an investigation, Sarah was deemed mentally ill and was admitted to a special hospital for psychiatric treatment. The family court decided that Ziad should be taken from me to ensure he was properly cared for, given that Sarah was undergoing treatment. I left my job in an attempt to fix everything and reunite my family. A few days after everything that happened, I met a young Iraqi man living in the city. I explained everything that had happened to him, so he would understand my situation and my problem. He told me that these behaviors were likely due to possession by a demon or perhaps a jinn. The important thing was that my wife was possessed. If it was indeed possession by a demon, it was a simple matter. We could contact a sheikh, a friend of his father's, who lived in another city. We could ask him to come and treat my wife, and if she recovered, we could regain custody of our son, and Ziad would be returned to us. What do you think? I was desperate and searching for any solution because I had exhausted all my options. I had gone to the hospital many times, but the problem was that Sarah didn't even want to see me. So, I agreed to talk to the sheikh. I called him and explained the whole situation to him. After a day, he came to the city, and I met with him. I requested to see my wife, who was completely refusing to see me or even talk to me. But through a lawyer, I was able to enter the hospital with the sheikh, pretending that he was a relative of hers. It didn't take more than 10 minutes, and we were left alone in the room. Sarah was tied to her bed because she had tried to harm herself, so for safety reasons, she was restrained. The sheikh was holding a simple bottle of water in his hand, something you'd buy from a store. He went straight to her and sat right in front of her. It was obvious she was in pain, but she couldn't speak. The sheikh made her drink some of the water and began reciting verses from the Quran. I stood a short distance away, watching what was happening. As he recited, Sarah lost consciousness without saying a word or screaming. But what I saw with my own eyes made it clear that something strange was inside her, controlling her actions. It was as if something else inside her was the one looking at the sheikh with angry, demonic expressions until, as I said, she lost consciousness. The sheikh told me to go home and wait. He said, "We've done our part, and the rest is in God's hands. Hopefully, within a few days, everything will be back to normal." And indeed, just a few days later, I received a call from the same hospital informing me that Sarah's condition had improved and that I could see her if I wanted. Thank God, she started getting better and returning to her normal life, but she couldn't remember anything that had happened. After some time, the doctor decided that Sarah was well enough to be discharged, with the condition that she undergo periodic checkups every few months to monitor her mental health. I also received a court order granting me custody of my son Ziad, as his mother had recovered and returned to normal. We were finally a family again. After everything that happened, I realized two things. First, that my wife Sarah was indeed possessed, most likely by the man in the factory whom I never saw. Second, for some strange reason that no one could explain, Sarah developed a problem. According to the doctor, she would never be able to conceive again. What caused it? No one has any idea, and I don't know who that strange man Sarah saw in the factory was. But he almost completely destroyed my life and my family. Now, I'm settled in a new home, I found another job, and my life is stable, thank God. But we never had another child, aside from my son Ziad. Thank you for watching, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do it now.